Let's start with a very interesting story from Nova Evil Capitalist. Car dealer tells me I should waste my time and go to a competing dealer because they also won't give me the price they list on their website. This is a rather long, detailed story, so if you're the impatient sort, please skip to the bottom, though note you're missing out on fun details. This took place 8 years ago, when I was buying my first new car, not just a new-to-me car. I spent a good amount of time researching the options available, both in terms of other models from other manufacturers and option packages on the car in which I was most interested, so I knew exactly what I wanted coming in the door. In 2014, car dealer websites hadn't quite gotten to the level of borderline bait and switch trickery you see these days, so if a dealer's website said they had a particular car on the lot at a particular price, they almost certainly did. There were several in the region that matched what I was looking for, one specifically at my existing dealership. This wasn't a smaller dealership, it was one of the largest in the Northern Virginia area for this particular brand. I had had a reasonably good experience with their service department overall, and figured I'd give their sales department a chance to shine. That was my first mistake. I showed up on a Wednesday after work. It was early June, so with the mercury being in the upper 90s, I was dressed in a comfortable, but still very presentable combination of a polo shirt and khaki shorts. When I entered the sales side of the dealership, I could see what appeared to be all the salespeople in a conference room laughing and joking while taking scissors to the tie of one of the men present. Later, I found out that was a rite of passage after making your first sale. I waited around for a minute or two as the conference room had glass walls, and it would be impossible not to notice me as I'm not exactly a small fellow at 6 feet, 6 inches tall. When no one came out to greet me, I went up to the receptionist's desk and said, "Hi, I'm interested in model of car, and there's one in stock I'd like to see." Her response, without even looking up from her phone, was, "Okay." I stood there for another 20 seconds or so and then politely asked, "Would someone be able to show me that car?" This finally prompted her to look up from her phone. She looked me up and down, scoffed a bit, and said she'd go and get someone. I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, hoping that things would turn around. That was my second mistake. The receptionist came back with what looked like the youngest, most wet behind the ears salesperson she could find, as evidently I wasn't worth the time of the more experienced folks. I explained that I was interested in a car that their website said they had in stock and provided him with the printout, showing the stock number, price, and all other pertinent details. It took him a while to find the car on the lot, but after a brief test drive, I knew it was what I wanted and began the sales process. I had a trade-in, which had been primarily serviced by them and for which I already had a written offer from CarMax, so I knew how much I should receive for it. He quoted me just over half of that figure. When I pointed out that I could get several thousand more by taking it to the CarMax just up the road and had a written offer from them for that specific amount, he went and got his sales manager, who offered to drive me there and pick me up afterwards, but that they wouldn't match what CarMax offered. I was a bit surprised that they didn't want a nice used car to sell for themselves. 6 years old, top of the line, reasonable mileage, and serviced by them specifically. But again, cut them more slack than they deserved. When we got to price, things really fell apart. He quoted me a price that was several $1,000s higher than what they displayed on their website. When I showed him the printout again, with the noticeably lower price, he looked to the sales manager for guidance. The sales manager immediately took the line that the price listed includes all available rebates and special offers, and you may not qualify for all of them. I was now frustrated and showed them printouts from the other dealers in the area that had a similar price shown and said that if they weren't willing to honor the price listed on their website, I'd just go to the next closest dealer that had that model in stock at that price. His response sealed the deal for me. "Go ahead, waste your time and go to competing dealership. We won't hold it against you when you come back here." I told them, "Okay, thank you for your time. I'll go to competing dealership," and got up to leave. No one stopped me, and the receptionist said nothing as I walked past her out to the parking lot to drive to the other dealership. When I got to the competing dealership, it was already around 8 p.m., as I had spent a fair amount of time at the first dealership, and Northern Virginia traffic has never been known for being reasonable. I had a salesperson approach me immediately upon entering the dealership, and I explained, I've just come from first dealership and want to buy particular model of car. Both of you have that car in stock with the options I want. They wouldn't give it to me at the price shown on their website. If you will, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line right now. The salesperson immediately took me to his office, verified that they had the car, and confirmed that yes, the price on their website was accurate and I could walk out the door with that price. We started the process, and when we got to the trade-in, I further explained how the other dealership tried to lowball me on the trade. He said if I could produce a written offer from CarMax for the price I mentioned, they would match it. I gave him that paperwork, and without any further discussion, he agreed they would match that, and we moved on to financing. I hadn't gotten this far with the other dealer, but I had already lined up financing through my credit union. He asked if I'd be willing to see if his F&I guy could match or beat that figure. I agreed to let him try, and he came back with a rate that was 50 basis points lower. Needless to say, I was already very happy with these people, but that definitely sealed the deal. Right as I was finishing the paperwork, the salesperson from the first dealer texted me to ask if they would give me the car at that price. I responded back that they would, and I was finishing up the paperwork at that very moment. He immediately tried to call me, then texted me saying he'd give it to me for $500 less. I responded to his text stating that I'd already signed the paperwork and he had lost the sale. Once the paperwork was complete, the exceptionally pleasant and helpful salesperson at my new dealership spent an additional half hour after the dealership had closed for the night, running me through some of the features of the car and showing me how the infotainment system worked. This was completely above and beyond what I expected, as I thought I'd just be reading the 300-page user manual to figure it out on my own. I drove home that night with my shiny new car, a very happy camper. The next day, I decided to rub a little salt in the wounds of the first dealership, so I drove there straight from the office. For context, I work in the banking industry, and at that point, it was still very much business formal dress. I showed up in my suit with my briefcase and had people falling all over themselves trying to help me, including the receptionist who clearly remembered who I was midway through, me asking for the particular salesperson I dealt with the prior day. She offered me a seat and asked if I wanted some coffee while she went to get him, and I politely said, "No, thank you. I won't be here long." She somewhat quietly, sheepishly responded that she'd be back with that salesperson very shortly. There was a couple in the waiting area who seemed a bit displeased that they'd been waiting for a salesperson, but I got one the moment I walked in the door. No more than a minute later, the salesperson and his manager came out. The salesperson recognized me and, with a look of defeat on his face, shook my hand and asked how I was today. Before I had a chance to respond, the sales manager spoke up to introduce himself as if I hadn't spent an hour and a half with him the previous day. After I reminded him that I was there yesterday, and he had said it would be a waste of time to go the competing dealer because they'd never give me the car I wanted at the price shown on their website, his demeanor very quickly pivoted back to the snotty, insolent person I dealt with the previous day. He proceeded to ask, "Well, did they?" with a bit of a sneer. I said nothing but turned to the side and clicked the remote for my new car so the horn would give a few chirps. He said, "Good for you," in a rather curt tone and walked away, leaving the poor salesperson on his own. I shook that salesperson's hand, thanked him for his time, and turned around to leave. The receptionist spoke up as I walked past her and asked in a rather chipper voice if I needed any further assistance. I politely responded that no, the other dealership had provided me exactly what I needed, and I was all set. To make things just that little bit better, as I passed the couple sitting in the waiting area, I saw them exchange looks with each other that seemed to say, perhaps we should go to the dealer I mentioned. I said nothing further and walked out of the building wearing the smile of a winner. TLDR car dealer treats me poorly and won't honor the price they list for a car. Tells me that I should waste my time and go to a competing dealer in the area because they also won't honor the price they list for the car. But the competing dealer does honor the price, and I get a fine new car at a very nice price. The malicious compliance was flawless. The salesperson's dismissive attitude led to an unforgettable experience. Not only did OP get a better deal elsewhere, but his returning with the new car proved the first dealership's arrogance wrong and humiliated him well. The next story from slice_of_pie. No, you don't understand. I really wouldn't do that if I were you. TL. Doctor. Employee is certain she knows better is wrong. And FAFO. Warning. Pretty long. Sorry. As I talked about the last time I posted in here, I work in a union shop, and I've been a shop steward for most of my 25-plus year career. In that time, I've seen some both figurative and literal, and every single time I've ever been unwary enough about how fate works to utter the words, "Now I've seen everything," the universe will inevitably hand me its beer and say, "Watch this." Stewards, despite the general perception of us, aren't there to defend employees who are accused of misconduct. We're there to defend the collective bargaining agreement, meaning if you've well and truly yourself and your future with the agency we both work for, my role is primarily helping you determine which of your options for leaving you're going to exercise. I've been at this rodeo for a long time, and management and I generally have a pretty good understanding of how things are going to go. Enter Jackie. Jackie was one of those unbelievably toxic peaked-in-high-school cheerleader types with just enough understanding of what our employer does, how it's required to behave within federal guidelines, and what its obligations are when you utter certain mystical phrases like, "I need an accommodation," or discrimination based on a protected class. To be clear, those things are not just law. They're also morally right to be concerned about. And so, my employer actually bends over backwards and does backflips to be certain that they're going above and beyond the minimum. Jackie was not a minority in any sense. She was female, but in a workplace that's 80% female, that doesn't quite count. She may well have been disabled, but that was undiagnosed, I think, and I'm inclined to think her claims of it, much like most of the rest of the things she said, were complete fabrications. The point at which I got involved was at the tail end of over a year's worth of actions by Jackie, in which it rapidly became apparent that her manager was, in fact, an excellent candidate for canonization. I got referred to her when one of my other union friends contacted me and said, "Hey, Jackie so-and-so just got put on administrative leave, and it's total BS, can you help?" I get referrals like this a lot, both because I've been around forever and because I have a pretty good track record for ensuring that people accused of they haven't actually done get treated fairly. So nothing stuck out to me as odd. I contacted her, and she had absolutely no idea why management would put her on admin leave without any warning and confiscate all of her agency-issued devices, access, and instruct her that she was not to have any contact at all with anyone she worked with during work hours. This immediately sent up a whole host of red flags. For one thing, I know the senior HR guy, that is the HR analyst's boss who's involved. Having been down the road of difficult situation, but this is what we can do negotiation with him many, many times over the years. I don't always agree with him, but he's fair, and usually we can come to some sort of middle ground. At any rate, he would never suspend someone out of the blue without a really, really good reason. She knows what she's done. She has to. So I gave her my usual spiel of things to do and things you should not do. Don't tell me, or our employer, things that aren't true, especially if you think it'll make you look bad if you don't. Don't talk to your coworkers. Don't talk to your friends about this, particularly because you live in a town of under 2,000 people. Everyone knows everything about everyone else. Do not talk with management or HR without me present, period. When they do start asking questions, keep answers simple, to the point, short, and do not give lengthy explanations. Tell them what they want to know, and otherwise, shut the f***. I've been here and done this many times. I know this process very well. I can't tell you what they're going to do, but I can tell you what I think they're going to do, and I'm usually either right or pretty close to being right. I have been surprised. Nearly 3 weeks went by of radio silence from the agency, other than a bland sort of, "We want to talk with Jackie about utilization of work assignments, tasks, and equipment. Email that tells you almost nothing while still being literally true. Finally, it was go time for a meeting. And I did something I haven't done in a really long time. I physically drove to Jackie's worksite instead of attending virtually over an hour and a half each way. What the hell? The weather was nice. We met ahead of going in, and I asked her if she remembered the rules I gave her at the beginning. She said she did. I asked her if she'd been following them, and she said she'd been very careful to. Swell. In we go. During the meeting, it was almost immediately obvious to me from the questions they started asking that Jackie was in serious not like written warning or pay reduction. No, they were going to go for termination. And she was probably going to be very lucky if they decided not to refer it to the DA for criminal prosecution. An abbreviated summary of just the high points. Jackie had hundreds of confidential documents and electronic files in her personal possession, many of which fall squarely under HIPAA. She had emailed these out of the government system to one of the 4 or 5 personal email addresses she maintains. Her explanation for this was questionable. Jackie had logged overtime without permission. A lot. And on one memorable date, when she was vacationing in Europe with her family at the time, she said she'd called in to attend a meeting, but didn't have an answer why that meeting had apparently been 11.5 hours long and nobody remembered her attending by phone. Jackie had audio recordings of disabled and elderly people with whom she was working that she had taken without their consent or knowledge. A lot of them. Jackie's overall work product and system activity reliably showed that she was logging in at the start of her day, from home, and she worked some in the afternoon. But there were hours and hours of time when her computer was idle. She explained this as participating in union activity, which I knew was BS, because Jackie is not a steward. Jackie has no idea what the collective bargaining agreement actually says about much of anything beyond stewards can do whatever they want and management can't say, which is uninformed, shall we say. At any rate, steward activity must be recorded and time-coded as such. Jackie has never attended steward training and so didn't know this. Apparently nobody ever told her that. There's more. There's so much more. But in the interests of brevity, I will summarize the next 4 months of my dealing with this woman by pointing back to the cardinal rules I gave her and simply say, she broke every single one of them. A lot. When it finally got to the dismissal hearing that comes before the "you're fired" GTFO letter, she told me going in that she wanted to run things because she had some stuff she wanted to cover that she thought I probably wouldn't be A, comfortable doing, true because it was irrelevant, B, didn't know much about, again, true because she'd invented details, story, and witnesses as participants, and C, she felt like I wasn't really on her side in this to begin with. Not quite true. She was a member, so my job is representation here. Me? I really don't think that's a good idea. I've done a lot of these. You should let me handle it. Jackie. No. I know what I'm doing, and I talked with my attorney about this a lot. You can't stop me. Me. You're right. I can't. But this isn't going to go the way you think it will. Jackie. I know I'm right. They can't do this to me. Me. This isn't a good idea, but okay. It's your show. In we went and sat down. The senior HR guy I mentioned earlier was there, and he gave me a funny look when I sat back, laptop closed, and said nothing. Dismissal meetings are actually our meeting, and we get to run them from start to finish. They're there to listen. She started talking, and I have to give them credit. They took notes, listened to the things she said, and kept straight faces the entire time. It went exactly as I figured it would. Just the things they'd asked her about in the first of the several meetings I attended with Jackie had covered terminable offences on at least 4 or 5 different subjects, independent of one another. At the end, when she finally wound down, they all turned to me, Jackie included, and asked if I had anything I wanted to cover or that I thought may have been missed. Nope, I said. I think she covered everything already. I don't have anything to add. That afternoon, I got the union copy of her dismissal notice. Generally, they are open to at least discussing the option of the worker resigning and giving them a neutral reference going forward, but that wasn't in the cards. The last I had heard of Jackie, the Department of Justice was involved with her and her husband, and I'm reasonably confident that it didn't go well for her either. I do know that she will never work for the government again, as the letter was pretty explicit about what information they would release to any government agency asking for a reference. So it goes, they followed the collective bargaining agreement, terminating her with ample just cause. It was really a perfect case of malicious compliance. OP took a very good decision to not represent the oversmart Jackie, which led Jackie to getting herself fired.